two gunners, myself and a guy by the name of Dance, got together in Washington, and we talked about World War II. There was not one single point that we could agree upon.
Behind the mesmerizing blue eyes that captivated the world and the image of an exemplary philanthropist lies a legacy torn apart by tragedy and secret deals.
When you travel far.
Hollywood's glamour cleverly concealed the darkest corner of an iconic dynasty. From secret audio tapes, nearly set on fire, and the agonizing death of his only son, to a tens of millions of dollars estate betrayal. Every dark corner seemingly buried forever alongside the father. Still, after decades of silence, Paul Newman's daughter decided to step into the light, officially exposing the entire truth covered up for over half a century. Entering the early 2000s, legendary actor Paul Newman began preparing for the final chapter of his life. In his late 70s, his greatest concern was no longer the spotlight of cinema. He directed his entire mind toward preserving the massive charitable legacy he had built. For many years, Paul Newman always maintained a consistent stance regarding the division of power and assets. He wished for his daughters to be the ones directly continuing the humanitarian mission. The initial governance structure was set up to ensure the central role of his children. According to the original legal documents, Paul clearly stipulated that each daughter would receive an annual budget of $400,000 USD. This money was not for personal use, but was allocated directly to separate charitable foundations managed by each child, helping them maintain community activities. At the same time, the actor's original last wishes also affirmed that at least one family member must sit on the board of directors of the Newman's own foundation. This ensured that the Newman bloodline retained supreme oversight over all profit distribution decisions of the charity organization. Paul Newman once emphasized this direction when speaking to the press. "I want to ensure that my children have sufficient means and authority to continue giving positive values to society after I am gone." This affirmation became the guiding star for the family. Even so, a severe health crisis in 2007 completely altered the situation. Paul Newman was diagnosed with late-stage lung cancer. The cruel disease quickly eroded the legendary actor's physical strength and caused a noticeable decline in his memory during his final months of life. Taking advantage of Paul's deteriorating health and compromised cognitive state, a silent shift of power took place. His two closest advisors, financial manager Brian Murphy and Mr. Robert Forrester, began meddling deeply in the legal documents. Archived records show that a series of important revisions to the charitable foundation and the will were presented for Paul to sign. These changes were executed quietly, completely out of the control of the family members. By tweaking technical clauses, the two advisors systematically erased the daughters' names from the supreme executive body. Entire financial control and strategic decision-making of the Newman's own foundation were gradually transferred in full into the hands of a new management team, headed by Murphy and Forrester. Contrary to the original wishes of the Hollywood legend, the final amendment stripped away all veto power and fixed seats for the daughters on the board. This sudden change erected a solid legal barrier, isolating the Newman family from the foundation's operating mechanism. In later legal filings, his daughters described the incident with supreme outrage. They took advantage of a dying patient who was no longer fully capable of understanding to commit an act of usurping control over the family legacy. On September 26, 2008, Paul Newman passed away peacefully at his home in Westport, Connecticut, at the age of 83. The entire world mourned a cinematic legend and a brilliant philanthropist. But few knew that a silent crisis erupted immediately after his funeral. Right after Paul closed his eyes forever, the new management team of the Newman's own foundation instantly took over total control. His daughters quickly realized they had been pushed out of the most important decisions regarding the legacy left behind by their own father. More severely, the new board began imposing harsh regulations on the actors' children. They threatened to reduce or entirely revoke the $400,000 annual charitable budget if any child spoke out in protest or tried to interfere with management affairs. This pressure forced Paul Newman's daughters into silence for a long time. They had to endure unreasonable oppression to protect the charitable funding their father intended for community organizations, while the family internally was completely fractured and hurt. The quiet silence kept to protect the family's honor for over a decade finally exploded. When the final straw broke, Paul Newman's daughters not only brought the matter to court, but also decided to lay bare the entire truth about their father. The naked truth. After Paul Newman passed away, the relationship between his family and the management board of the Newman's own foundation fell into a state of outward politeness, masking deep resentment. His daughters attempted to maintain charitable activities strictly according to their father's original wishes. This quiet endurance officially collapsed in 2020. The executive board of the Newman's own foundation unilaterally made the decision to slash the annual charitable budget for the daughters by 50%, reducing it from $400,000 to $200,000 for each person. This move left the daughters without sufficient resources to sustain long-standing community projects. This was considered the final straw, pushing the conflict that had simmered for 12 years beyond control and straight onto the path of public legal dispute. In August 2022, two daughters, Susan Newman and Eleanor Nell Newman, officially filed a lawsuit against the Newman's own foundation in the Connecticut Superior Court. This was a shocking event in American media and the philanthropic world at the time. The lawsuit alleged that the foundation's board of trustees severely breached commitments made to the founder. They demanded $1.6 million in damages to be transferred entirely to the charities whose funding had been cut strictly, keeping nothing for personal use. The two daughters affirmed that the lawsuit aimed to restore the exact authority granted by their father. Nell Newman declared before the court, "We are fighting not for money, but to protect the legacy and true charitable mission that my father entrusted." Parallel to the court battle, the historical and personal aspects of Paul Newman began to come to light. Two other daughters, Melissa and Clea Newman, unexpectedly discovered a massive repository of forgotten documents. They found more than 14,000 pages of typed manuscripts transcribed from secret audio tapes thought to have been destroyed. The family decided to publish the memoir titled The Extraordinary Life of an Ordinary Man, based on this valuable source material. The memoir quickly caused a public sensation by exposing raw, unvarnished aspects never before revealed. The book did not paint a picture of a perfect Hollywood star, but portrayed a man torn apart by deep psychological wounds. The pages detailed Paul Newman's severe decades-long alcoholism. At the same time, the work exposed the grief and guilt weighing heavily on his mind following the tragic death of his son, Scott Newman. Continuing the wave of truth-telling, his daughter, Melissa Newman, released the book Head Over Heels, Paul Newman, and Joanne Woodward. The work compiled a series of private letters and never-before-seen photos of her parents. The 2023 book unlocked an entirely new perspective on Hollywood's iconic marriage. Instead of an image of a peaceful paradise, the work showed that the relationship between Paul and Joanne went through many upheavals, along with intense internal longings. The letters showed they had overcome many rifts, media pressure, and disagreements in daily life. This authenticity gave the public a more human and objective look at the 20th century cinematic icon. All these revelations demonstrated the determination of the Newman daughters. They accepted tearing down the artificial curtain of perfection that the media had constructed around their father's name to protect the truth. Melissa Newman once shared about the decision to publicize family secrets. "My father was a human being of flesh and blood with flaws, and he deserves to be remembered with the fullest truth rather than a fabricated legend. Speaking out, after decades of suppression, did not stem from greed for wealth or fame. It was an act of protecting human values, returning the charitable legacy to its rightful course, and preserving the most authentic memory. Among the materials exposed in court and the newly published memoir, Paul Newman's Most Bleeding Wound, was the tragedy named Scott. The timeline rolls back to the 1970s, where the dark corner of fame swallowed the iconic actor's only son whole. Shadow of Blood. In the late 1960s, Paul Newman's family experienced a silent wave of fractures following the upheaval of divorce. Scott Newman, the only son from his first marriage, entered adulthood bearing the immense weight of his father's fame. Determined to escape the overwhelming shadow of the top Hollywood star, Scott ventured onto the artistic path. He tested his abilities through bit roles and became a stuntman in various film projects. Even so, the pressure from the Newman name became an invisible wall, hindering recognition for his personal efforts. The press at the time consistently referred to him merely as the son of the famous actor. Prolonged frustration plunged Scott into severe psychological despair in the late 1970s. He gradually turned to stimulants and alcohol as a drowning escape from the harsh reality. On the other side, Paul Newman was completely helpless in reaching and understanding his son's hidden pain. The generational gap, combined with a dense work schedule, pushed father and son further apart. In personal notes later revealed, Paul bitterly admitted his own failure in the role of a father. Family affection hit a dead end when every attempt at conversation failed. Paul Newman once painfully wrote in his hidden memoir, "I was completely useless at listening and opening up to my son. I did not know how to help him." By 1978, Scott's substance dependency became increasingly severe. A series of collisions and injuries forced him to resort to high-dose prescription painkillers prescribed by doctors. On the fateful night of November 20th, ultimate tragedy struck the legendary actor's family. Scott Newman was found dead at a hotel in Los Angeles at the young age of just 28. The forensic report and official investigation concluded the cause of death to be acute drug overdose. The lethal combination of alcohol, the sleeping pill, Valium, and painkillers claimed his life. Scott's sudden death created a national media earthquake at the time. The public was stunned by the gloomy dark side behind the luxurious life of American cinema's leading iconic family. The passing of his only son dealt a heavy blow to Paul Newman's psyche. The cinematic legend fell into severe mental collapse and was gnawed by persistent guilt. To face this immense pain, Paul Newman decided to channel the loss into concrete action. In 1980, he officially established the Scott Newman Center to support drug prevention efforts. This organization focused on educating adolescents on substance abuse, prevention, and training specialists. This was regarded as an act of self-punishment and a silent attempt at atonement by the grieving father. The agony of losing his child transformed Paul Newman into a different person. He threw himself into charity as a way to seek release. But behind that hundreds of millions of dollars empire, the darkest secrets began to be quietly tape-recorded by him, the half-burnt tapes. After the tragedy of Scott's passing, Paul Newman strived to transform pain into a new purpose in life. By 1982, he and his close friend A.E. Hotchner officially established the food brand Newman's Own, starting with homemade salad dressing. This business model created a historical turning point in the American corporate world at the time. Paul made a revolutionary commitment: 100% of the company's after-tax profits would be donated to charitable causes. In its very first year of operation, the company brought in millions of dollars in net profit. The unexpected success demonstrated the actor's sharp business vision, turning artistic fame into a resource for society. Paul Newman once shared with great humor regarding the brand's meteoric growth, "It is quite strange that my salad dressing brings in more profits than all the movies I have ever starred in." 10 years later, in 1992, the involvement of his daughter, Eleanor Nell Newman, opened a new chapter. Nell recognized the vast potential of the organic food market and persuaded her father to expand the business scale. She co-founded a subsidiary brand named Newman's Own Organics, specializing in organic food products. This new product line quickly reaped brilliant success, spreading the family brand across major supermarket chains. By the late 1990s, the organic food branch managed by Nell had contributed over $50 million to the main charitable foundation. This achievement affirmed the excellent managerial capabilities and independent standing of the daughter's generation. Parallel to the flourishing charity empire, Paul Newman faced quiet internal struggles. During the period from 1986 to 1991, he decided to launch a secret audio recording project. Paul collaborated with screenwriter Stuart Stern to conduct hundreds of hours of in-depth interviews. This project aimed to capture the most authentic portrait of his life, stripping away all media fabrications. During the recording sessions, the legendary actor did not hesitate to lay bare the darkest corners. He frankly confronted his severe alcoholism, personal failures, and the persistent insecurity that haunted his entire career. In one recorded tape, Paul once bitterly confessed, "People see a perfect icon, but in reality, I always live with a sense of agony and fear regarding my own mistakes." As age caught up with him, the fear of these authentic details leaking out began to consume Paul's mind. He worried that the unvarnished truth would harm his family and the charitable organization. On a day in the late 1990s, Paul Newman made an extremely drastic decision. He gathered all the original recording tapes, took them out to the driveway in front of his Connecticut home, and set fire to destroy the entire audio archive. The act of burning the tapes seemed to have permanently erased every trace of the Hollywood legend's dark memories. But Paul had no idea that the entire content on those tapes had already been meticulously transcribed into typed text by his assistant beforehand. Behind the 14,000 pages of documents that nearly went up in flames lay the exact key to unlocking the dark corner Paul Newman tried hardest to conceal. The timeline rolls back to the 1950s, where the blossoming Hollywood glamour coincided with the collapse of his first marriage, sparking a series of family tragedies that spanned decades. Darkness behind the velvet curtain. Before becoming one of the world's leading seductive cinematic icons, Paul Newman experienced a period of struggling to find a foothold. In 1949, at the age of 24, he married young actress Jacqueline Witt, while both were still unknown. The first marriage quickly brought the actor 3 children, Scott, Susan, and Stephanie. Even so, financial pressure alongside burning career ambition on the Broadway stage soon pushed this relationship into a cold state. The dark turning point appeared in 1953 when Paul participated in the play Picnic in New York. Here he met actress Joanne Woodward and began a secret affair lasting 5 years, regardless of his peaceful family. Throughout that half-decade, Paul Newman lived in agony between fatherly responsibility and personal desire. This illicit relationship was kept hidden from media scrutiny thanks to tight protection from the Hollywood system. By 1958, when hiding was no longer possible, Paul officially finalized divorce procedures with Jacqueline Witt. Only a short time later, he quickly held a wedding ceremony with Joanne Woodward in Las Vegas, opening a new chapter. Paul Newman's departure left a deep wound for his ex-wife and first 3 children. A wave of psychological fracture began to form as the children realized they were gradually being pushed out of their father's new life. Years later, his daughter, Susan Newman, publicly shared the pain of being abandoned. She choked back tears, admitting, "I felt like my siblings and I were torn out of my father's life, as if we belonged to a past he wanted to erase completely." Meanwhile, the second marriage with Joanne Woodward quickly brought Paul a second generation of children. 3 daughters were born in succession: Eleanor Nell in 1959, Melissa Lissy in 1961, and Clea in 1965. The appearance of the new home created a distinct gap between the 2 generations of Newman children. The favor and care Paul bestowed upon the later family unintentionally deepened the emotional wounds of his firstborn children. Behind these emotional upheavals, Paul Newman's psyche was heavily influenced by a complex relationship with his biological mother, Mrs. Tress Newman. This cold, controlling relationship created permanent emotional fractures. In personal documents, the actor once admitted that Mrs. Tress viewed him as a display item rather than a child. This emotional deficit from a young age left Paul constantly struggling to build connections with his own children. Opening up about childhood pain, Paul Newman once sorrowfully wrote, "My mother never saw the real me. She only loved the external shell she created for me herself." To fill these psychological wounds, along with the growing pressure of fame, Paul Newman began turning to alcohol as a soothing remedy. A hidden addiction to alcohol began to ignite and take root in his life. Tragedy, pride, and the fight to find the truth behind the legendary blue eyes have closed the curtain on the Newman dynasty. Speaking out after decades, the daughters not only reclaimed justice for the charitable legacy, but also gave back to the public the most authentic Paul Newman.